Hello, everyone. We are live. This is Idle Insights, and I am joined by the amazing Aabria Iyengar, and we're going to talk about all things. Well, Aabria is the summer of Aabria after all, so it is something we should be talking about. How are you?
Got a season. That's very exciting.
You got a whole season.
Got a whole season.
Did you expect getting a whole season?
No, but I'm very grateful that the swampiest, most humid part of the year is mine. Yes.
Yeah, it's a little intense in LA. It's a little intense summers in LA.
I am deeply convinced that summer is only people's favorite season because we were like programmed to like it as children because we got it off from school. But it's mostly uncomfortable wherever you are.
Yeah, like fall comes, I'm like, this is it. This is my jam. It's pumpkins. It's a bunch of like falling leaves and creepy stories and giant skeletons scaring children. I'm like, I like this.
I mean, same, but wildfires because I'm in LA. Those are our fall colors.
It's true.
It's like the same thing.
It was Blade Runner last year. I saw the footage. It was
a little bit.
Yeah, it was a little intense. So let's go ahead and dive in, and we're gonna jump around a lot of places. But what was your first tabletop experience, and what got you hooked?
Ooh, okay. Technically, I played Fiasco before I ever played like a real like sword and board RPG. So like I want to like slide that in and say that I was like primed for like the idea of sitting down and like telling stories collaboratively and dice being vaguely involved from that, where I think there was like a month and a half where we played it a bunch and kept desperately trying not to turn every movie we were like making into a Coen Brothers film, but like that was like the emotional cadence of our whole fan group, so it was what it was. But my real first RPG was D&D 5th edition. Shortly after it came out, my friend group, it was really my now husband. Oh, shout out, it is my anniversary today.
Good thing my God.
I just remembered right now. Please don't tell him that I didn't remember before, but we know now, and that's great. I'll handle that later. But yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, but his board game squad invited me to come play when they were like, "Oh, we're gonna go like give this a shot." And I was brought in to play Tyranny of Dragons, and the DM recommended that I play a cleric. And I was a cleric for like 2 weeks before I was like, no, I'm a warlock.
Yeah.
Definitely. This makes no sense narratively, but I just want to spam one cantrip till the cows come home. And very quickly realized that I liked RPGs more than everyone in the group, and was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the friendly local gaming store and get very into Adventures League and just mainline as much D&D as I can. And I did. And it still haven't stopped yet, as we can tell, because I have a summer now.
I think that's amazing. I think that makes a lot of sense too. You going from cleric to warlock is like, yeah, but I want this on my own terms.
Yes. Now, what if the god I get my powers from I call daddy? And that was the only difference. I just wanted to be a sugar baby with my spells, and I think that's good for me.
What was the name of that character? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, Temperance. I feel like, I was going to be so excited because I usually keep my little minifigure from it, like within arm's reach. I don't know where it is now. I think my cat stole it, but Temperance, a little tiefling. She was a little red tiefling. She was so cute. And then in our like epilogues at the very end, she like went off to figure out how to never die. So she wouldn't have to give up her soul to her warlock patron. And I choose to believe that she's a lich now somewhere, very happy.
Going from this initial experience that you got, which is pretty amazing, to literally today, which a book was announced, correct, that you worked on.
Yeah. So TalDorei Reborn was announced today. I'm so excited and happy. And so it just so happens that in Exandria Unlimited, we decided to move back to the continent of Tal'Dorei, almost as if they were like tied in a little bit. So because this jumps forward to the Mighty Nine era, which is about 20 years after Vox Machina, some of the changes in the world that I was bringing into Exandria Unlimited, I definitely was like, hey, all right, people behind the scenes, like, I'm going to do some weird stuff in the world. Is that cool? Does it stay canon forever? And they were like, oh, about that. So there's a book. Let's have a conversation. So you can see like the through line for some of the stuff that's already occurred in the season, and some of the things that are coming up too, are referenced in a part of the book. And it's so, I woke up, saw the announcement, burst into tears, and I only had a very small part. So I can't imagine how excited everyone else that's like worked on this and been like so excited to announce it is feeling right now. So I'm so happy for them.
What has that been like? Like all of this that has happened, because you seem to be like this snowball that's coming down a mountain and just getting bigger and bigger. Like the Summer of Aabria is like not like is like now like a fireball moving
My
down a
mental
mountain.
conception of all of this is, you know how you can't, like, if you're at the top of a hill and you start to run down, you can run full speed, but then it just becomes a like, don't mess up, don't mess up. Like, that is the feeling of all of this right now, because like we've been gearing up for this. Like, this has been all of 2021 has just been like preparing for like the big shows that got announced in June and have been running through, and some of them have just finished and some are like mid going, and a lot of it was just like a full sprint down a steep like decline, going like, okay, this is fine, just don't fall, we're gonna be great. And just that, like, so focused on like the next step ahead of you that you don't really have a chance to see like what's going on, and you just know like gotta stay focused and like keep going. And at some point I will reach the bottom of this hill and look back and see all the cool stuff that happened and be like kind of floored and amazed. But like when you're in it, you're just like, I'm just in it, and whatever comes, like, we will make space for, and we will figure it out, and just throw all of the bandwidth you have at it at any given time and just see where you end up.
What is the thing that you enjoy the most? And I expect it probably kind of moves side to side as it does for many people, but like dungeon mastering and game mastering, or being an actual player, because they are so
Ooh,
completely different things.
they're so different. Um, yeah, I definitely, like, it's a pendulum and I go back and forth. I think it's usually like after I run a couple campaigns, I have to recharge by only focusing on one thing, and then spending a lot of time like outside of the game world, like consuming like TV shows and books and movies, and kind of refilling that like reference set, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I drain them all, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take like 2% from the like last 5 things I've watched and try to curate something out of that. So it's really nice to like settle into a single character and like reinvest in like one arc, and playing a different kind of game. I really like help, like, I love character arcs. I think I am like a character forward game master. So I think it's really fun to like play in a different space where you're like trying to like give assists and alley oops to everyone at the table. And it feels like a different kind of active listening that like takes pressure off of you. Cause like, yeah, when you're not the DM, you're like, oh, I can like hang back and watch what's going on in a way that doesn't presuppose that like at some point I'm gonna have to jump in and drive something forward. I can just be like carried along the wave of like the story that the DM is like unraveling, and the story of like interconnectedness that like the players are telling. And it's nice to like be swept up. It's like floating down the lazy river a little bit after going down like a big slide in a water park. So it goes back and forth. I don't think I prefer one over the other like all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you get? Do you have a few characters? Because I don't know that I can ever be in enough D&D games sometimes, because there are so many different characters that I like to explore. Because I come from a theater and film background, so I'm always like,
Yes.
even though I tend to play the same character all the time, because I have a main.
Same. And I'm like, okay, I have so many ideas. Okay, I guess I'm gonna play a warlock again. That's just a thoughty little brat. Cool.
Do you have a few that you are like right now, just kind of like juggling around in your mind, especially since recently you and I were talking about TV shows, and there's so much
Yes.
recent inspiration.
Okay, so we were talking very specifically about Loki, and I have never I don't think I've ever really like leaned in and invested in like a pure trickster character.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love the like tactical use of like mirror image. It's really fun. Like, man, there's something when you're like really steeped like a tea bag of nerddom in D&D and like the media you consume gets immediately contextualized in like Dungeons and Dragons. So it was very fun to watch Loki and then just all of the like things that were popping up. I'm like, okay, major image. Oh, we're gonna throw a little like mirror image of and just like kind of naming off the spells and effects and
Yeah.
situations and just as much as I love wanting to play a Loki character, I actually am like very into this like sort of wild bureaucracy of like someone that's just like I am lawful to a very strange code that doesn't make sense to a lot of people,
Yeah.
but has like a very buttoned up feel, but it's buck wild. So I'm definitely like kicking around like how do I bring the sensibilities of like a TVA agent into D&D. So if I ever figure that out, I'm gonna have a really weird one shot. So good luck.
Yeah, the characters in the TVA for Loki were absolutely amazing
Yes.
and so intricate in their
Right?
belief. Like, I said, I forget Hunter's first, full name, but she is so purely like Oath of Vengeance, like transitioning to Oath of Vengeance Paladin.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, it's so good. And then like going into like all the character stuff, like that lie that that sort of foundational like pillar of identity lie that a character believes in
Mhm.
order to like function in the world. There is nothing cool. I would love to play in like a super long-term campaign and like play that disillusionment arc out. Like every like your core personality and identity is on something that will be quickly like revealed to be a lie. What do you do? Like how
Yeah.
long do you like lean in? How do you like extricate yourself? I love it. We could do this forever. I will shut up, but like yes, I'm thinking about that a lot right now.
Yeah, I am rather semi-famous for playing trickster characters, and like my very first character that I had when I was a Avon, and who is in Idle Champions, is a trickster, and I'm obsessed with being a trickster. Dylan
I
Wilkes.
have run into Avon like degrees of separation away because I was in one of Tanya DePass's one shot,
Oh no!
and he was like brought in, and I was like, oh, a cameo. It's like the MCU. I love this, and I was so excited. And she was like, "Do you know who we're talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, I do. I'm a nerd for my friends on the internet. Like, yeah, let's go. This is very good for me. Thank you."
Tricksters are hard because you still have to like always be punching up,
Right?
because Loki can be very tiresome as a
You
character.
it like props to you for being able to run that consistently and really well because I have seen so many of that like so many versions of that archetype go very badly. So the thing you do if the audience doesn't know to give you enough props, like the thing you do is incredibly difficult and you make it look effortless. So like
You're very
yes,
kind. What is your favorite player character right now that you are playing? Or can you
ooh,
say?
oh, this is good. um Oh, my character on failed save is a Gloomstalker Ranger. She's got a couple levels of rogue. I was like, I'm gonna like this was a character I originally picked for I was a guest one time and I was like, oh, I don't care about Rangers. I'll play a Ranger. And then I ended up coming on to the show in the second season and was like, okay, now take this thing that was initially like a goof and like a series of bits and try to turn fast into like a full-blown character with like arcs and connections and like a story to herself. And so yeah, now we're like I think tomorrow are we allowed to talk about it? Yeah. There's like a wedding. My character's getting married to another PC and like
Oh wow!
yeah, like it's so cool and it feels really cool to go from like I'm a Gloomstalker Ranger, I'm so edgy and I fade into the shadows to playing this like crazy game where she's died twice. It's been a whole thing and like keeps coming back. Like I love found family. Found family is like the thing for me it's a trope but it's not a cliche yet. So just really leaning into that and having gotten to play that across like 7 or 8 months now has been like really gratifying. So I would say Fess is probably my favorite character that I'm like currently in and stewing around in.
That Gloomstalker Ranger rogue combination is pure nightmare fuel because of all the extra attacks and then that initiative bonus, and also I'm so dark and edgy, not even the shadows can see me.
I love it. Like I step into the shadows and go like when I first picked it, I was like, this is gonna be really goofy, and now I'm like, oh, I got a good bow too. Hey, I'm a full nightmare in the first round. So it's a very like it's a comedy driven game, and I love that like part of me is just like, haha, goofs are fun. However, I will be power gaming for this round. Everyone get ready. I'm going to punch 100,000 hit points into the sentient donut that we're fighting right now.
Valid. I think that's a good that's a good little juxtaposition that you've got like this super dark edgelord who's like, yeah, but I'm going to do like 200 points of damage the first round.
Yeah,
so
feels good. You're just like, okay.
I get you're a donut, but I'm super low carb right now. So
yes. This is how we be keto friendly. We shoot and obliterate.
What is it that you enjoy? And I don't want to give any spoilers to any shows that we're talking about, but we are talking about being agents of chaos as dungeon masters. Yes. And we all spend all this time coming up with these intricate plot lines and all this backstory, but I don't know that there's anything more gratifying to myself than having that experience of it all being thrown out because of the player's choices. And it's just pure joy for me.
So good. Like, I agree. The stress of it, because it is definitely stressful when you're like, all right, I spent hours and hours planning, and here's what I think we're gonna. I'm sorry, what? Oh, good. Like there's something that's like the immediate like flop sweat of like, oh, they want something different, and then like the joy of chasing down the party's fun and like what they care about, and. It's never to say that like, oh, we're entirely improvisational now. And like, I also don't know what's happening. Like, I definitely have learned from like the Mercer school of like build the world out in every direction so that like, if they run that way, like you can fill in the details in the bright work, but you always sort of already had a frame for like what's going on there. And I will say that like, Misfits and Magic, the Dimension 20 show that we just aired the finale last night. Like, I knew that was going to be chaos going in. So it was just like, my goal here, we're playing in a world that's like heavily derivative and parody of Harry Potter. And that universe is predicated on like meticulous detail. So I was like, I spent weeks up to the filming, like building out the world, and we'll see what they care about. So I knew they were going to be chaos because they're like a bunch of comedians and amazing. I will say the level of chaos from the EXU squad was a surprise.
Oh yeah,
I was like, all right, this is Critical Role. They do like epic storytelling, and we're gonna go down the what? Okay, so we're gonna start with a pooping contest on the roof. Okay, here's where we are. I get what we're doing here. This is gonna be great, and it's been so gratifying that I think there is something to my GM style. I hope that like pleasantly like coaxes chaos out of players to go like, I promise I will keep up with whatever you want to do. So just do something. Like we were talking once again. Talking about Loki before this starts, my favorite thing about the finale, vague spoilers, earmuffs if you haven't watched it
earmuffs
yet.
If Loki.
Was engaged. I won't say names, just engaging with that last character whose entire energy felt like a DM that just wanted to be surprised.
Yeah.
And like, I felt that on like a cellular level. And I think all of the best games that I've ever been a part of on either side of the table involved either me or the dungeon master with that. Like who's gonna surprise who? That sort of like looking around the table sort of standoff, like, okay, who's got the like chaos ball right now and it's gonna run in a really fun direction. So yeah,
I kind of think that there's 3 different kind of players, and you are getting to acutely experience this. I think there are players, I think there are dungeon masters, and then I think there are dungeon masters who are your player. And
Yes.
And you can kind of spot the people who are dungeon masters most of the time, but
Yep.
today they're playing. What is that like dealing with Matt Mercer, who like that's immediately a dungeon master character out of the gate?
Amazing. I So there's always that nerve, like my big like set of like nerves going into this was like, okay, I'm taking over for two like forever DMs. What are they going to build? Like, do they want to build something that's going to kind of sit as like a side DM, like, like I'm dad driving the car and mom's in the like passenger side and we're all trying to control the kids together, sort of like that side DM at the table. And I love that Brendan and Matt very specifically was like, I refuse the brain cell. I am the chaos. Like, he made the world and then built a character that's like, I know nothing.
Yeah.
No thoughts, head empty, pure himbo energy. Let's go. And I like, to me, that's like the super like, other than being like very honored and excited to tell a big cool story on like a big stage, it feels so nice to like look over at your friend and watch him just like completely like let it down and let it out and be the kind of like player and character that like is both maddening when you're a GM, but also like just incredibly fun. Like you get that like sense of jealousy, like, wow, I wish I didn't think about consequences at all like that. So next time, so it feels very good to be able to hand my friends Matt and Brendan like that. Here's your chance. Now go off.
Yeah.
I've got you. Don't worry about it. Whatever you want to do, I'm here for you.
You can see the catharsis happening before you. Like, there's
like little looks. The way it's filmed will never completely capture the little moments of like, right? Just like in the game when you're like, the table's doing table stuff. And that little bit of DM at the back of his heart just has a little nod of empathy. Like, I know, right? I'm like, okay. All right, deep breath. Here we go. We're still in it.
It's a big question. It's a often question I have because everyone has a different experience. But like going from where you started in tabletop to where you are right now, what do you feel like is the best advice to new players? To some people that maybe have zero tabletop experience and want to dive in, what do you say to them, and how do you, or also what do you say to people to make them accommodating and to encourage them?
Yes. Ooh, I would say for people that are like looking to get into it, it's always hard to talk about like trying to curate the best moment or the best table and your best chance for success. So like aligning all of that, like find a table that's filled with people that you like people you want to tell a story with, and they can be strangers, but just that shared sensibility of like, we all want to tell a story here, like we all want to replicate a specific kind of experience. When a table's all on the same page with regards to like what they want to accomplish, I think that's the best chance for like everyone having a great time. Because like some games you're like, I just want to like cry my eyes out and tell this incredibly cathartic story about like loss and sacrifice and nobility, and like that's my hero's journey. Sometimes you're like, I am having the toughest time at work right now, and I would just love to slaughter a bunch of robots. I'm just here to obliterate sacks of hit points, and that's like what I need right now to self-actualize. And I think conversations about like tone and constantly checking in with like your table on like where you're at and what you want from your game, whether you're a player or a GM, is like, that's the big one. Like, be very into communicating. You don't have to hide everything from the rest of the table. If you're like, well, there's like a secret, or like, this happens a lot if you ever want to do like a romantic storyline in a game of like, if you have a crush, please let everyone know. One, to make sure it's okay to like play through that storyline. Some people are just not feeling it. But also, if you give everyone a chance to try to like curate those moments and like tell that good story and like have that hit, character surprises and player surprises can be like distinct. But if we're all going like, we're all trying to do like a little bit of a weird rom-com thing. Like you're now inviting everyone else at the table that may not be involved in this like relationship aspect of the game to like join in less as a player and more as a writer and like part of the writer's room of this story to be like, okay, what can I do in this moment to like help curate like the next beat in this relationship? And that works for so many kinds of storylines. So like talk. My biggest advice is always communicate with your dungeon master, communicate with your players, keep checking in with your friends, like obviously not in like a are we okay, is this fine, but like just like, oh hey, I've been thinking about this, oh hey, I just finished like the latest season of Loki, I've been thinking about this a lot, like what do we think about trying to like craft the game to chase our fun? And that has to be like an open narrative. As far as like the sort of bright work, I would say play the thing that you like. And we talked a lot, like we've talked a bit about like pulling from like the things that we watch and read. I think lean into that. You don't have to play what you think the setting demands. If you're like, oh, I really want to have just like a early 2000s like proto influencer like hot girl moment in the middle of like a high fantasy campaign, like Amy Carrera was playing with Opal and EXU, like do that. The world will and the table and the DM will figure out how to like justify your vision with like the world and make it cohesive and make it make sense, but like that all starts with like chasing your fun. And if you are having a good time, if you are doing things that are like not harmful to the rest of the party but clearly in your lane for like what you're self-actualizing on, like that brings people in. The joy of it is what gets people excited to like tell a story and come back and like keep appearing at the table and working together.
What
So
are
that's my
some what are some
yeah.
of like the most surprising moments for you? Because I occasionally tabletop and D&D actually do surprise me. Like again, I was playing a trickster character, and he's pretty much just a terrible person, but I would say more akin to like very Loki, but more akin to the character at the end of Loki, because it's a
Oh,
person who has existed too long.
love
But
it.
I realized in a moment where a dungeon master puts in a situation that this character very much doesn't believe in evil and good or alignment and was defending a lich, and I'm like, oh, this is my hard line as a character, is I don't believe like the clerics or the paladins should smite this lich, because I'm like, what is the definition of evil? And I realized, ooh, I'm really skewing very Papa Midnight from Constantine in this
Yes.
neutrality.
Love it.
What have you experienced as a player, where, or even a dungeon master, where you're like, you didn't know this thing about you or that character?
Oh gosh. Wow. I'm gonna try to like as I try to scramble and pick like one good example, I feel like this is the thing that I love so much about TTRPGs and why I play them so voraciously is that that is a constant for me. Like every character, at least especially in the beginning where when I didn't realize like, oh, the thing that you're doing when you bring a character to the table is taking some thought or some aspect of yourself and blowing it up and investigating it and finding the edges of it. So I have found out a lot of stuff about like personal philosophy and morality. I think I come down very much on the line of, yeah, like alignment is a weird thing. um I think there like relativism is so interesting and perspective is so important that like is alignment this sort of capital E evil, capital G good uh thing that like there's an arbitrary line for, or is it a matter of perspective? And like anyone sufficiently smart enough can like talk themselves into believing with their entire being that like they are on the side of good and doing the right thing, and they might be right given their personal context. So yeah, I think I, especially now as a GM and I'm sort of seeing my own patterns more, I love playing with arcs of like power and investigating like what do you do when you are given power, when you wrest it from the world? Like, what is your responsibility to other people? What's your responsibility to like the world and that sort of who you were in your background versus who you are now? Like, in a game where you are leveling up and becoming like demigods and mythic figures in a world, like I think the most interesting thing I can do as a DM is constantly make my players like check and reevaluate their philosophies. Like, you believed this before. Is this still true? Can I come up with a circumstance for you that is close enough to the edge that you're going to have to like rewrite that sort of. I like stress testing the core pillars of personality with both hands as a DM. So I think that's my favorite thing, that I didn't realize that like I cared so much about how people think about themselves and their relationship to power and goodness. And I love a temptation arc. Like, I love really making people go like, are you sure? Are you sure this is who you are and what you want?
Mm-hmm.
And let's double check. So I don't know if that says like that I'm an evil DM or like interested in corruption, or just years of like, I mean, my background is in political science and I focus on international relations and political theory. So like, yeah, I love playing. I'm like, all right, we're gonna prisoner's dilemma this. Like, let's really investigate like what RPGs and D&D specifically, with like the kind of stories it tells, like what's the morality that comes from it, and let's play a game of like testing and the praxis of like individual philosophy in this world. So
I have a follow-up to that. Real quick, I would just want to invite and thank everyone who's watching the stream right now. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining the stream, and we've got questions incoming, so keep those coming in, and we'll start answering those in the last half of this hour. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I have become more obsessed with that gray area where we see like shows like Constantine, and where shows like Loki are kind of exploring like, who are you? I don't think there's anything that I've been more absolutely thrilled with, because I was actually having a problem with my character, because I felt they were being too mean. And that Owen Wilson dissecting Loki at the very beginning just was like literally the conversation I just had in real life with a friend about like, how do I adjust this character and move them away? Like, you know, do you enjoy hurting people? Like, you know,
I love
those questions in D&D are so fantastical. But I always am very scared in D&D, and it's kind of like growing up with it. I'm scared of lawful good more than I am scared of anything else. And I feel Celestials are terrifying, because I know devils will make a contract and will obey a contract, but Celestials have a little too much faith.
No.
There's something fascist there.
I agree with my entire being, and that's why I think like going back to the like MCU sort of analog, Captain America is the most terrifying character in the MCU. He will unmake the world based on his personal philosophy, and that's wild. Like,
twice. Yeah, like I will say, like, Chris Evans, wonderful. I get the
Friend
Captain
of the
America.
Show, Chris Evans.
Yeah, Captain America, also great. But I will say, in Civil War, I was like the only one in the theater. I'm like, I feel like Stark's kind of right now. Like,
Tony Stark was entirely right, and I will go to my grave defending this and him. And I think, like, going on with that, I think that's why, like, Captain America's arc in the MCU had to be a disillusionment arc. It goes back to that, like, you have invested your entire life into this sense of, like, what is lawful and what is right.
Right.
And the world was always complex. And now and yet, like, the future is one in which there is no excuse for being ignorant to the complexities of the world. So you have to reevaluate, like, where do you, like, what's the hill you're going to die on? Where do you stand? And you can't just sort of fall in line with what the conventional idea of, like, good or right or proper is. And, like, yeah, the I was like, the Chris Evans at the end, the Captain America at the end of Phase 3 and, like, the Infinity Saga, to me is like that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, someone that understands that there's complexity and has a sense of, like, a lawful code but knows that it cannot extend everywhere in all directions and apply to everyone. That it has to be a personal code, and that like until there's overlap and like that personal code is causing harm to someone, you can hold it as long as you can. And the moment at which like it becomes a problem in that way, it, like in violation of like someone else's self-actualization, you have to reevaluate. And like to me, like yeah, agree. Just I agree.
So speaking of political science, like what drew you to that initially? Like why did you go to school for that specifically?
This is a good question because like I don't know. I originally went to college and was like, okay, I'm gonna go bio pre-med. I want to be like a sports surgeon. I was like very into sports, and I was like, oh yeah, I just want to like bash some elbows and cut up some knees. That feels like a very good way to like live my life and be adjacent to the thing I was raised in. And then, what happened? I don't know if there was any like real triggering moment, but I think just that like sort of awakening that happens when you're an adult on your own and sort of left to your own devices to acquire information and figure out what you think about it. Like I'm very much a child of like the Jon Stewart Daily Show, like political awakening generation. So there was a lot in that too, and a lot of like that post 9/11, like opening realization of like
That some lack of apathy.
Yeah, exactly. Like what that means, like in what we were taught and what may have been true 100 years ago with American foreign policy versus like what the actualities of it are today. And I think the moment I was able to see beyond like the scope of my childhood, which was like very sheltered, like I was a good student and a good athlete, and that makes for a very small world. The moment I realized that the world was extraordinarily bigger and more complex than like my set of experiences, like I turned and chased that full bore. And that's why I became like, okay, let's learn about like these sort of like structural underpinnings of like how societies function, and then like let's get into like international relations and figure out like what the actual like chessboard of groups of people and systems of power actually is. And yeah, it's always really easy to like build that sort of, and that's how I got to D&D. But I think that there is something very important in that is how I got to being a DM. Because at the end of the day, the most satisfying story I can help facilitate telling is one of characters, and like the very specific connective tissue formed and explored at a table by a very specific party. Like you can run Waterdeep Dragon Heist 100 times, and as long as the table is different and the characters are different, you're going to tell a completely different story with like different like spotlights on different things in the text and in the plot and interpersonally. But the cool thing that the DM to me is the world that has its own priorities and its own set of pressures that it will exert on the party across like the arc of the story. And I think that to me reaches back to like my poli-sci days of like, let's talk about systems. Like what is the context that breeds this story specifically?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I leverage that to like heighten the thing that we're doing in this moment for this narrative?
I think that makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels, because I think a lot of people gravitate towards D&D, particularly when you're a teenager, but you are kind of fed a narrative of like, this is the world's narrative, as if the world is the DM and there is no other kind of structure. Like if you watch a film, if you read a book, if you kind of consume any kind of piece of fiction or story, it's completely tightly controlled and it is just as written. You can have an awakening as you grow up and you realize, wait, I have a part in this story and I have a perspective, and everything that I've been told is not necessarily true. In fact, D&D is sometimes is that first taste for people that, oh
Yeah.
wait, I can say that I grab a dagger and I stab this thing and I have freedom to do that. I think is that first hint of freedom, and also, I mean, potentially for a lot of players who are involved with tabletop, like a wake up call that maybe not everything you've been told is true.
I love that. Like, it's so cool that we can have this sort of like tiny, safe, sequestered, like coming of age story within a lot of people's like actual coming of age stories where you're like, oh, let me like flex and think about how I can affect the world and how consequences come back to me. And like it becomes like a really good way to like work on that and build empathy and then decide who you're going to be in meat space where consequences can actually hurt.
Uh, we do have a bevy of questions that we are about to jump into. I do want to ask one more question. What do you love? What are the stories? What are the kind of the narrative hooks that you love just for both being a player and both being a DM? And is that and also on top of that, is there anything that you've explored either as a DM or a player that was either aspirational or something that you just want to explore in your own mind? Like currently, you know that I'm on a health fitness kick, so I'm looking very strongly at the monk ascendant dragon because I just kind of want to keep that of top of mind wherever I go. Is there anything? Have you had a moment like that where you're like, okay, I want to like work on this or I want to explore this?
Yeah, I think I'm very into like int builds right now because I think I have shied away from uh the like role play and sort of character exploration of sort of having like your intelligence as your primary stat and like the foot that you lead with when you walk into the world. And like I've played a couple wizards, but I really want to like mess around with artificers some more. And I think that has a lot to do with like, you know, serving my nickel as a DM a bunch right now of just like, what does it feel like to be a builder? And like to build things and release them out into the world, and they can be both incredibly like good and incredibly like harmful, like they are their own thing and you have to like let them go. And like I just, yeah, I think that's the thing I'm thinking about a lot and like eager to explore is just like the cerebral part of D&D of yeah, because like yeah, I think int is so often a dump stat.
Yeah.
For people, like what if you really leaned in and said this thing that like mechanically is not always valued in the world is the thing that like I excel at, and like what kind of story do you tell when you are the one in the room with the brain cell? Like that feels very fun and interesting. The kind of stories I tend to tell as a GM and as a player, I think I lean a lot into a character that walks into a situation with not a lot of reason to be connected, that will via like interpersonal moments and like external pressure from the world find a reason to stay. And there's something so like beautiful about that. Like I have to find a reason to be here, and sometimes the reason is like extrinsic, or like if we don't stay together, like we are the people that are the only ones that are aware of this problem enough to try to solve it, and like the stakes are the multiverse. And sometimes they're just like, I could walk away right now and you will stay on your quest and I could go do whatever and self-actualize like my own stuff in my backstory, but like the reason I'm here is because like these people are my people. And I think both of those things are like finding the reason to stay and finding the reason to be there are like those are my juice right now.
Well, I'm going to go and let you know you were like one of my all-time favorite interviews already in my entire life. You're just so wonderful.
If you make me cry right now, I will fight you.
I mean, I am known for making people cry.
Because you're a monk. You're a literal monk, but I will fight you. Get one hit in and then just drop.
You're fantastic. I could talk to you all day. I am sad that we only have 1 hour. I would be dismissive of the audience if we didn't try to jump into some questions, but we need to do more things for sure. Or like just hang out and talk about Loki all day.
We can just do that. That seems fine. Friend of the show, Loki Lofison.
So we got Laofu-san. It felt like a dig.
Right.
So, first question: the summer of Aabria has literally been the best post-COVID lockdown blues cure. I can't even. The words are insufficient. It's not a question; it's a statement. But I also agree. It does kind of feel like the first punch out of the pandemic of like, let's just be happy, just happy things are happening everywhere. So it does kind of feel like a momentous moment in that way.
Thank you.
So I agree with that assessment. Another question from Natalie. I just started watching the first episode of Misfits and Magic. So far it is incredible. I definitely will be watching it all next week. Not a question, but another great statement.
Awesome, thank you. I love that game with my whole heart. I watched the finale at like 1 this morning and was sobbing. Like, you know, that like good cathartic, like I feel like I took a shower level sob. Like I am clean emotionally now. Like that's how I felt at the end of it. So it was very,
that's
very
fantastic.
Good.
Sudin said, interesting in sharing the personal journey with the party, then everyone gets invested. More of another statement, but absolutely true.
Yay.
I really do like the idea of like, hey, I want to explore this personal journey and then looping people in, even though they not in a metagaming way are going to use that information, but they can, be ready to be a player in that.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Like kind of like allowing everyone to be a little bit more of a DM, like a heads up. So we got Quest Junkies UK, role-playing as my first power D&D character made my experience and emotions I never knew I had. I agree. Yeah. It's great to feel like superpower gamey sometimes.
Right? Oh, man. Like, as much as I love, like, let's do a character arc and, like, tell the story, like, sometimes power gaming, when you're like, I have built the perfect round.
Yeah.
And with it, I will flip off the DM and make them eat their goddamn dice. Yeah. I love that. Like, just every now and then where you're like, I'm a monster. I'm a little goblin. Let's go.
Yeah.
Feels so good.
Oh, I love goblins. Gloomstalker Ranger Assassin. I'm just like, if I get this off the right way, you die.
When the initiative hits right, and you're like, I'm gonna melt something.
Like I feel like I'm kind of like
encountering?
Waggling like a cat that sees a mouse. I'm just like, I want it. We've got another question. I like third edition descriptions because they were more based on character action choices and less on beliefs. Evil wasn't out there ruining people's lives as a goal. They just looked out for themselves first and would take advantage of others if the opportunity was there with little or no risk. I agree. Yeah.
I like that.
I like having evil characters in the party, frankly.
Yeah.
I will say time and time again, some of my favorite interactions I ever had with my lifelong character was I was an assassin because I was 18. I was in my edgelord goth phase.
We all had a Hot Topic phase. You're good. You don't have to explain it.
Yeah. And I was in that place of like I poisoned the king and stuff and all this other stuff. We had a paladin, and he knew I was evil, but I had like a ring that hid my alignment, and it was this kind of balance of like I know intellectually you're evil, and I'm 100% sure even as my character you're evil. But we have this unsteady kind of dance that was actually funny and charming and it was serious, but not too serious, right?
Yeah.
It was comical. Like, I know you're killing people, but I know you're killing bad people.
I love that, where you're like, don't
Well.
Okay, the next time you mess up, we're going to have a conversation. I'm putting a pin in this. Good job.
Yeah.
I guess. Am I making this happen? Is this because of... Okay.
Yeah. I don't condone what you did. I'm just disappointed. Like, it started becoming like kind of like weird kind of vibe.
That's so good.
We have Tempest status question. When were Ted and having a sibling fight with Opal, did you channel that sibling rivalry to relate to it? It was a really good scene, full of drama and tension.
Thank you. This is my favorite thing, and I don't think I've said it out loud yet. I'm an only child. I have never had a sibling. I remember very specifically when I was like 6, my parents sitting me down and being like, "Do you want a little brother and sister?" And I went, "Absolutely not. I will." I think I told them I will be an only child again. And I think that was the first time I'd ever threatened anything before. Like the implication being, you can present me with a sibling, and I will return to my only child status, and whatever happens, happens. That's not on me. Like, I've never wanted a sibling. So this lean in, I think it had way more to do with the fact that like from the very beginning, Amy, like I have been on Amy's wavelength. Like, I love her to pieces. She's one of those people that like when you like talk to her for 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, so we're best friends and we didn't know it until now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think it had more to do with Amy's playstyle as a newer character being like, I'm going to constantly push and figure out where the edges of my like individual agency are.
Mm-hmm.
And in that pushing, and a lot of it becomes pushing against the DM, it's always been super fun and great. And it felt like Ted became the opportunity for me to push back as a character and be like, the thing that you've built that you're doing on this meta sense of kind of feeling at the edges of pushing people a little too far, maybe that's been part of the dynamic that like you and your twin have experienced their whole life. So like, let's dig into that. And then just, it's very cool to be at a table with like actors, because like the moment Amy got into it was like, there's nothing for me to do in this moment but to like match that energy and push it as far as it will go. And I don't consider myself a classically trained actor. I'm an improviser, like improv comedy, but like all of that is still centered and rooted in like what is true that you've established in the moment and like following feelings. And so like, yeah, no one was more surprised than I was that I was crying by the end of that scene. And then we were still in initiative and I was like, okay, let's move along. Oh, cool. So yeah, that was great.
That's fantastic. We've got Quest Junkies UK. We got a lot of UK people. Oh, well, it's the same one. Do you have any advice for role playing through a player character death as a dungeon master? Out of everything I've prepped in my homebrew world, PC death is one of the things I'm super nervous about happening. Especially, I know my players are incredibly invested in their stories. Thanks, you're both amazing. I totally agree. I get very anxious about this, but I feel like sometimes death is like a necessary thing, and it's a great thing to role play through.
Yes.
But like it is like, ooh.
I used to be super nervous about it, and now I'm kind of obsessed with it, both as a DM and as a player. I kill my characters off constantly at tables because for me, I think at some point I reached a point where it's probably just like the sheer number of PCs that I've played where I'm like, okay, it's no longer about like me binding up all of my like hopes and dreams into a character. It's now bound into the story. And I think the coolest thing that I've like taken away to like acclimate to the idea of PC death is knowing that like the thing that your players really want at the end of the day is to have like is to feel like their characters matter while they're alive and even in those last moments. A thing I liked that I recently learned and I'm like adding into my repertoire is when when one of your PCs is down making death saves, ask that PC like on their turn when they make the death save, if it's like if it's a positive result, ask them about like one memory or something emotionally that's like that they're trying to struggle and live for. If it's a fail, like ask them like for a flashback, do the like their life flashing before their eyes, like what's that thing that they're about to like regret leaving forever. Let your characters have big moments, because like death cinematically and in film and books is all about creating like the culmination of a story. Like this is its big crescendo, and if you personally, I think if you honor that as a dungeon master, then the death feels as good as the life did. And players will feel like, oh, we did something really cool here, and I'm at peace with this character arc. So if we're going to play a game of like trying to get the character back, that's one thing. If you're like going to bring in a new character, at least they feel like the catharsis of a life well played.
Yeah, having that kind of arc out, which I think makes a lot of sense for a lot of characters, and then like knowing that you like made a difference is huge. Like I don't mind
Yeah.
losing several characters. I do play some characters that don't have an arc, or they're curses that they keep going on.
Yes.
In that kind of weird, like I'm on standby mode. I am my own worst enemy, so kind of like me dying really isn't like, a hook. Like I have to work through this thing. I think Loki is very much an example of a character who like just keeps coming back because honestly, it's almost like purgatory, right? You
Yes.
know.
I love that too. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So good.
We got like another one. We got Wilbur. Wow, talk about inspirational, combining social, political, and psychological thoughts, and the fun of games with clear sentences. I love it. Great, nice affirmation from the audience.
Thank you.
We've got Vixter180. Love you to pieces, Aabria. Really enjoying watching you on Critical Role. I've loved watching the journey, and you have inspired me to be a DM and give me a DM and give me a DM a break. Got any tips for players transitioning to dungeon masters? Interesting. Yeah.
I love this. Yes, my biggest tip is you are still even as dungeon master, you are a player at the table. Your fun is important. There are some people who do not like it watching EXU, but a fair number that do. That like I will very clearly set boundaries with the table in real time, where I'm like, we've been doing this for a lot. I would like to transition to something else. Like maybe I have like part of this is also we are a time locked limited series, and I'm like, if we don't like stay roughly on schedule, we will have to drop big sections of stuff that like I know the table wants to get to. Not that they know what's coming, but like I know they're gonna like it. But yeah, having like a clear set of boundaries and chase your fun. Like the thing that you like, enthusiasm is infectious. So if you're like, we're gonna start by doing like a really goofy thing that like I am so geeked up about, and maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's everything. The infectiousness of your enthusiasm to present something to the table facilitates buy-in by everyone else at the table. And also don't worry too much about being perfect. Like if there's a rule you need to look it up. Yeah. Like if you can't find it, make a call and then go back and check later. Like there is nothing about a DM that says you have to be like the perfect arbiter of the laws. You are there to do your best to guide your friends through a story that you're all telling together. And that just means do your best, and everyone will figure it. Like everyone at the table's rooting for you. Everyone wants this to be super great. So trust your table and have fun. Chase your fun too.
All right, we got one more question. We've got coming from TTRPG Gifts. Did you know Amy before EXU? Your relationship dynamics are so incredible. It seems like you knew each other for a long time.
Oh, thank you. Super did. I remember the first game, the first test game we did, where I met her and she came in with a character. I don't know if I should blow up her spot. I'm gonna. She came in with like a little test character named Denise, but Denise was spelled with a $sign. And I was like, oh, I know exactly what you're doing right now. You've got all of the like spicy hot girl energy, and you're not so steeply coded in high fantasy that like you are limited. So I think other than she's just an amazing human being and so kind and warm and funny and like giving, she's untethered from expectation. And that is, it's so thrilling as a DM, going back to like that last character at the end of Loki. Like her coming in was me like hopping up on my chair, just going, oh, chaos, let's go.
Aabria, thank you so much for being on the show. Real quick, where can we find you? I know we're over time, but where no, don't be sorry. Where can we find you? What do you've got going on? A book apparently came out as well.
Yeah, okay. Deep breath. We'll do this as fast as possible. You can follow me on social media at Quiddy on Instagram and Twitter, QUIDDIE. TalDorei Reborn was just announced. I have a little part in that, and that'll be released at late 2021, early 2022. Into the Motherlands comes back for season 3 on August 4th, and I play a character there. Misfits and Magic, we just aired the finale, but you can catch all of the episodes on dropout.tv. Today at 4 o'clock is the adventuring party for episode 4. Next week is the adventuring party that I'm like run for the crew, and we all talk about the behind the scenes of how it was made. Exandria Unlimited is every Thursday on Critical Role's channel, including tonight, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific. Chaos Carnival, my one shot that I ran for D&D Live with a bunch of WWE superstars, is on D&D's YouTube, so you can go catch that there. It was super duper fun and crazy and deeply chaotic. Failed Save is over on Pixel Circus's channel Friday nights at 7 p.m. and I'm a player. I play Fess, the Gloomstalker Ranger, over there, and tomorrow's episode's gonna be extra spicy. And then a game I ran called The Unleashed back in fall has a comic book run that we're doing as a crossover with Radiant Black over at Image Comics, so you can catch that there. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Oh, it doesn't seem like enough.
Yeah, I've been taking it easy.
It's the year of Aabria. I'm calling it now. It's not the summer of Aabria. Thank you so much for being on the show. You've been wonderful.
Thanks for chatting. This was great.
All right. Thank you, everyone at home. Thank you for watching. Bye.